Welcome back to another episode. Well, I should say like the first episode in a lot of ways, because it's the first time we're going to break this segment now on its own. We had it at the end of an episode already called Talking Points, and we spoke already about Ridley Scott and his attitudes to why he felt like The Last Jewel failed at the box office towards millennials and their attention spans and whatnot. I wasn't really paying attention. But so now this week's Talking Point, and what we brought along to talk with is about this Talking Point is Will Johnson. Will, you came on so nicely for the Incredible Hulk episode not too long ago, and now we have you back for some Texas Chainsaw Massacre talk, and pretty much that's this week's Talking Point. So we have Fede Alvarez, who did the Evil Dead remake to a lot of aplomb, and he's earmarked to do a movie for Netflix releasing next February, reboot or reimagine in whatever way you're going to take out of what the modern kind of style seems to be with a lot of these horror genres and franchises. You're going to take out a lot of the movies that you don't agree with, and you're just going to do a direct sequel to the original. So what's your expectations, for lack of a better word, and what is your opinion as well of this kind of team of people doing this now, where they're just cutting out canon and just rewriting history themselves?
Well, I will say that it creates a very interesting let me put it this way. So after I saw Halloween Kills, I posted on Twitter or something that after that movie, because Michael kills, I think 24 people in that movie, is a huge body count.
That's a bit right though. It was
I think it was 24, and
the firefighters, and then the big fight earlier on.
Especially at the end. I posted that he became the ultimate champion because if you count all of his deaths, he actually surpasses Jason because of that movie. And I got this interesting response from, I don't know who it was, but some guy was like, well, now that all the Halloween movies don't count except for these three, Jason is still the all-time great. And I'm like, so now we're like talking about, like, we've been talking about Marvel movies in the past. Like, now we got this multiversal like fandom now where it's like, well, if you don't count these movies, Michael Myers is still only second to the King. You know, it's kind of this wild thing. So I do think it's creating these new inroads of fandom that I find very fascinating.
A horror multiverse.
Yeah, but no. In all seriousness, I'm okay with it because, unlike, say, something like the Star Wars special editions, it's not taking away those other movies. It's just saying, hey, this timeline is a little different. So, like, I can still go back and watch Halloween 4, 5, and 6 to continue that storyline, or I can skip those and watch H2O. So it's kind of it's kind of like, it's not taking it away. Like the Star Wars special editions, like, I can't get my hands on legally the original trilogy and see that version of the story, you know, or whatever. So I know it's not a direct comparison, but like, these movies they're gone from this storyline, but they're not gone from history. I can still watch them if I want to. So
yes,
I'm okay.
Do you think it's a storytelling narrative? Do you think it's a bit of a cop-out?
Big time.
Well, I don't think it's a cop-out. I think the only issue I have with it is it's a little disrespectful to
Daniel Harris.
Well, Daniel Harris or the screenwriters of the other ones, or even the producers of the other ones, because it's pretty much saying, even if it's not saying it directly or intentionally or maliciously, it's kind of saying, hey, you fucked up on this one, so we're going to start over and pretend you didn't exist. Yeah. I mean, I understand rebooting stories and redoing stuff, and that totally makes sense, but it is kind of a... I mean, even Jamie Lee Curtis in her press was, you know, I remember when she did H2O, she talked about how she was, you know, she owed the franchise for giving her a career, and this is how she really wanted to do it. And even in the press tour for this one, Halloween Kills, she's like, oh yeah, that sucked. I wasn't really into it. I didn't really like it. So she's even disrespecting her own words from the. So it's a weird. It's a very weird thing. I don't want to say it's a cop-out. It's totally fine to do. Yeah. Obviously, fans have accepted it. I don't know how it performed over there, but here it's a gigantic hit, both of them. So
it's a hit worldwide.
But box office success, as we often say, is not the biggest indicator for a quality movie.
Oh God.
No, of course not. But I'm just saying, people
Transformers.
But like, for instance, like whether people liked the 2018 Halloween or not, people went out even more to see Halloween Kills. So so people were interested. People liked it. So, you know, I agree with you, but some people don't have great taste. But at the same time, you know, usually you'll see a drop off of interest if something doesn't work or whatever. So this one is continuing to build. And the reason why I'm talking about Halloween is because that is the biggest example of what Texas Chainsaw Massacre is doing, which is ignoring kind of everything. And I didn't.
Is it the first one or the first two that it's going to take from? Or
just the first one. The original is going to continue.
So like
age up all the characters as if nothing had happened for 40 years or whatever, 50 years. Like this is 50 years we're talking from the original. Like I love those characters are just going to age out of existence. Like if you're like how like vibrant, how much of a threat is a 70-year-old Leatherface?
Yeah.
I'm fucking that dude up at least 60% of the time. Take that chainsaw off me. He's just an old dude with bad jeans.
Well, that's kind of the same thing with Michael Myers in Halloween. He's supposed to be.
That's what I'm saying. They're aging him out of role.
Like
aging him out of existence.
63, he killed when he was like 6. Then 78, he was like 18 or something, or 20 or whatever.
He should have been 21 in the original, but they said 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he should have been. But he wasn't. Like,
no, he is 21 in the original. They just made a mistake in the credits where they list him as being 23. Okay.
So
but he's 21.
So he would have been Halloween Kills. He would have been in his 60s.
Well, he's supposed to be a little bit older than Jamie Lee Curtis, isn't he?
Yeah.
So just there, she's.
He would be at least 61 in Halloween.
At the very least 61. But the Jamie Lee Curtis thing throws that into the bus too, because I mean, in real life, she's like 65 or something. So
I think she's about 50 in Halloween. About 50.
Yeah.
Because she's, 16, 17 in the original? You know what I mean? Like,
I'd say something like that.
So her character, Laurie, is probably in her late 40s, early 50s. And Michael Myers is about 10 years older than her.
Yeah, well,
given the time frame. If she's 16, 17, he's 6 when he gets sentenced.
Yeah,
it'd be 15 years in the difference. Well, depending on her age at the time.
It's a little bit
depending on her age at the time. So she would have had to be in 4 or 5 years. She'd be in 1 when Michael Myers was 6. Is that right?
Yeah,
because she'd have to be 15 years later. So this is just a roundabout way of I just think if you keep on going back to these originals, you're going to age these characters out of existence, and you're going to age them out of being a real threat. Like, you know what I mean? Michael Myers 60. Like, Will, me and you, 2 normal dudes would have a good chance against a 60-year-old dude. You know what I mean? Like, Noel, not really. He's got bad knees, but he lost to a woman recently. But whatever.
Sorry, I'm having a brain fart. So I think Michael Myers, though, he's after crossing that threshold, and now he's not human.
He's transcending, as they said.
So now the rules don't really apply. He's unsurvivable.
Which is ridiculous, because the whole point, and this is what is probably going to trip up this Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing too, the entire point of David Gordon Green doing a direct sequel to Halloween 1 is that his whole point, and he's stated this in quotes, is we wanted to get back to just the existence of evil, that he's just a man who's evil. Yes. He's not supernatural. But by the end of Halloween Kills, he's been curb stomped. He's been destroyed by everything. And he's
been at least 5 bullets center mass.
Yeah. He killed half of Haddonfield. Like half of it, and the cops are 1 block away. They're the worst police ever. Like the Haddonfield police. Do you remember in Halloween 1 where the sheriff is when the daughter drives up? First of all, he doesn't smell her smoking the joint, and he's a cop. And then straight away he's she's like, "What's going on here?" "Oh, don't worry, some kids probably broke it. They just took some ropes, some knives, some Halloween masks." I'm like, "Oh, serial killer kid!" You know what I mean? Like.
I think the point is that it creates all these for fandom. Like I said, with the guy who tweeted me about the death count, this automatically creates probably the discussions the hardcore fans don't want to have, because now they got to get their brain in knots and everything. And that's not only just to say that. I mean, I actually haven't seen any of the remakes that they did in the 2000s of
The Rob
Texas.
Zombie movies.
No,
Oh,
I'm talking about
Texas.
Texas Chainsaw. I avoided
Really
those.
good movies. Really good movies.
Are they good movies? Okay.
Yeah, really good. Leatherface is ferocious in it. Ferocious, really
Okay.
terrifying. What's his name? Lee or Ernie, the guy from Metal Jacket. What's that?
Arlie
Ernie.
Ernie? Yeah, Arlie Ernie.
Yeah, he's amazing and he plays like a sheriff. And man, I highly recommend those movies.
Okay.
Like both of those, I highly recommend them. Marcus Nispel, the guy who directed the Friday the 13th remake, directed the one starring Jessica Biel, and both of them I think are really solid horror movies, especially Texas Chainsaw.
I think it's worth noting with Texas Chainsaw Massacre that the man who's taken the helm made Evil Dead. And
Yeah,
I didn't think we
2013
needed
Evil Dead.
because Evil Dead was perfect to me, but he took such a different direction. You know, like he took away the slapstick and just lent into this really brutal story. And I'm hoping that he can bring that bit of magic into it, because it's a results game. You can sit and talk about it all you want, but it's a results game. It's either going to be a good movie or not, and if it's a good movie, we'll accept it.
Yeah, I think I should be more willing to try those things, because I didn't see the Evil Dead remake. I didn't see any of the Texas Chainsaw, because I don't know if it's just like a snooty part of me or whatever, but I just I just kind of thought, meh, it's not for me. I like the originals, and I had that approach, and Vinny's going to disagree with me on this one. I had that approach for 12 years with the Rob Zombie Halloweens, because Halloween is my favorite horror film of all time, and in my top 5 all time, and I just refused to watch the sequel or watch the remakes. But first of all, I didn't think the first one was as bad, and then I loved the second one because, like you said, it went into a completely different direction than anything that Carpenter or any of the other sequels went into, and it became its own thing, and that's why I really like it. So
Awful movie.
I should give it a shot. I should give these a shot. That said, I'm not, even because Carpenter, like if we're using Halloween as the comparison, Carpenter technically didn't make Halloween 2. He wrote it and was kind of forced into producing it because he didn't want to have anything to do with that. He wanted to do the anthology thing with like Halloween 3.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like a John Carpenter movie. The thing is that Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2 are very much so Tobe Hooper movies.
Yes.
And I feel like by taking only one of his films and ignoring the second one, if you're trying to honor Tobe Hooper's vision,
you've already failed.
It feels like you're already picking it apart, because you're saying, well, because to me, I think both the first 2 Texas Chainsaws are masterpieces, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They're completely different films, but they make logical sense in the Hooperverse, because like this is, it feels like that world that he created in the first one is slowly expanding out into the real world, and he has a lot of social commentary going on there, and it's just gonzo. The second one is just insane, and yeah, it does feel like it feels like a natural part of its universe, and yeah, you're kind of cutting that off too, and you're taking away some of the traits of those original characters because you're cutting them in half, and
yeah,
it just feels a little weird. It would be like, I don't know, it would be like remaking, I know this is a weird comparison, but it would be like remaking or doing a direct sequel to The Godfather and ignoring Godfather 2 and 3. It makes those characters that are so rich and developed, it almost makes them, you're like ignoring all the character development you got, and those are all very specifically Francis Ford Coppola films. It's like kind of ignoring. You're like saying, hey, well, you did a good job here, but we like chapter 1, but we don't like chapter 2, so we're going to rewrite chapter 2. It feels a little weird to me. But
Trey Parker, who's of South Park fame, he did a, I think they took the piss out of like E.T., where they replaced the cops with guns with walkie-talkies. Kids run, but you remember that? And he, in an odd, serious moment, he just said, like, well, when's a film finished?
Yeah.
Like, when's the film just done? Like, when does it just get left alone and there? And it's of its era. Jason and the Argonauts. It looks great for its time. We know that special effects have come a long way, but there it is. And then you have, like, Indiana Jones, whatever. And then they're just going back and, in 1997, they brought back all the Star Wars and, for the 20th anniversary and all this kind of stuff. When's it done? And now we've entered into this new stage of just discontinuing films, like you said, chopping them up. And then, I don't know, I suppose the purist in me is a little bit pissed off, but I trust the director enough, and I'm cautiously optimistic. But at the same time, I do agree with every point that you made. That if you want to honor him, why are you picking apart his work for starters? It feels like you failed right outside the gate.
Yeah, for sure. And I read the article that you guys sent me. It's kind of the first. I think I heard a little bit of rumblings of it last night, which is kind of bizarre because we've got a really rich horror community over here in Arizona and in the United States.
Desert people.
And I've got a lot of the desert people, and I've got a lot of horror friends, and I haven't heard a peep. So I was very surprised that was this just recently?
Went under my radar.
I heard about it last night. I literally heard about it last night, and we were like, "This has to be our talking point."
Yeah,
because this is basically. I think I saw something of it last night, and that's it. So, I don't know. I don't know what to gauge of the excitement level of this. I noticed that. I know that they productions do a really good job of masking when they're filming something somewhere else. I mean, it's one thing to do, Toronto for New York City or something, but Bulgaria for Texas. Not sure how they're going to pull that off.
Tax breaks.
I mean, I recently watched
Tax break Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. I recently watched Power of the Dog on Netflix, the new Benedict Cumberbatch movie that he's getting Oscar buzz for.
Is it good?
It's very good. It's not great. It's good. It's directed by Jane Campion, and Jane Campion was kind of like she's like Peter Jackson. She's a New Zealander, so she films everything in New Zealand. So that movie takes place in Montana in the United States in 1925. Now that's okay because now I don't know like the terrain of Montana. I've never been, but it did seem a little bit rockier than normal. Like Rocky Mountains were a little bit more extreme rocky, but you can cover for that. And I've seen movies where like Peter Jackson did The Frighteners. He filmed that in New Zealand, even though that's supposed to take place like in I think
that in New Zealand. Did he? Well, I tell you that. Yeah, he pulled that one off.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I would have told you that was filmed in the States.
No, not at all. It was filmed in New Zealand, so they kind of pull it off. But Texas kind of has part of the reason why those first two films are so interesting is because you had it filmed in Texas, in the heartland of buttfuck nowhere, Texas, filmed by a Texan. So this is somebody who grew up in that landscape. Those movies, I mean, Texas is a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a little glorified by Texans. It's not like
the Republic of Texas and stuff like that.
It's not like when you cross the state line, you're suddenly like in a new world. Like it's not like
you just look down and your belt buckle has got bigger.
Everything is bigger in Texas, though.
It's not like you're like suddenly in Japan versus Arizona.
Yeah, of course.
It's not like a culture shock, but there is kind of an aura to it, and it is one of those weird states that has kind of all these different things going for it. Like Arizona has like up north we have like the woods and the climate can change because of the altitude. It can get snowy in certain parts of Arizona. Most people think of it just as a desert, but Texas has beaches. It's got mountains. It's got plain lands. It has so many different aspects to it.
And it's so fucking huge.
It is huge. Yeah. So because you can go to one side.
It was Mexico. It was part of Mexico. Like
it was. Yeah, because you can go to one side of Texas and it'll be all desert and Rocky Mountains. Another part will be all beaches, and then you go further north. It's all plain land because it's closer to like the middle of the United States. So it does have a very unique character to it. Like no part of Texas is the same. So
do you think that authenticity there I got there was just in the film? It just felt right.
No, like
that thing you can't really put.
Absolutely.
Words on it,
Especially the first one. The first one, and even to a degree the second. The second one has kind of a more high fantasy level to it because like the family lives in this like abandoned theme park thing, and it's a little heightened. But in that first
satirical.
Yeah, but if you've ever been on a road trip in the United States and you go through a lot of this empty land, like when you're you drive out to these areas and you see one house every 5 miles, and just it's just kind of endless green or gray or brown with lots of mountains. You get kind of this isolated feeling, and you're like, who would live out here? And they capture that so well in the first one, because it's just like, they're just, who knows what these people do. Like they're not surrounded by people. They've got this barbecue shack in the middle of nowhere, and then it just there's that feeling of isolation and that kind of almost Western mentality of like, you're isolated out here. And
do you think you see a lot of horror movies, like the more modern we get with our technology, you'll see a lot more horror movies that have this tendency to dip back into the past, because you've got so many outs. It's so much easier to create isolation from the outside world. Like as you said, you have a bunch of kids just driving through Texas, might as well be Mars back in the 60s or 70s. Yep. You got no phone, you got no computer, you got no Insta, no Twitter, you're not hitting up on anyone's feeds. You're just a couple of kids that got isolated from the rest of the world. And not only that, were you isolated by your location, but the situation itself, it just intensifies your isolation, because you have this family that are actively kind of keeping you away from the rest of civilization or humanity or whoever else might be in the location. I just think, like, when you have horror movies, you're going to lose a lot of that, because they're going to have the sequel that's 40 years or 50 years later, and how are you going to recreate that sense of isolation? I think in the article they mentioned, like, you're going to have hipsters going to go in, try and gentrify the area or some shit, and like, they're obviously going to be met with opposition. I think something along the lines that the article said. And I just think, like, it's going to be very hard to create that sense of isolation or distance from safety, because when you have technology and you have the means to easily reach the outside world, what are you going to do with the old, we can't get signal here, because that's fucking done to death at this stage.
Geotag yourself. You can, of course.
You brought up an interesting point, and so they have to get more creative. And what I really liked was the Candyman sequel. It's a sequel. It's not a remake. It's a direct sequel. I liked it.
Super racist movie.
What you mentioned there is interesting, because there was the gentrification angle that basically where the first one takes place has been taken over, by gentrification. It's like people are now, it's all the hippies and the rich people that live in that area that used to be very poor. And I like that they took the spirit and the ghosts of that prior world are haunting the new place. So I like that aspect, but that's very, very specific to that franchise.
Yeah. In
general, yes. Like, technology is making some of the horror elements a little bit harder. And I also think that, I know this isn't the greatest sequel in the world, but I enjoy it. But like, let's take something like Predator 2, right?
I love Predator 2.
I love Predator 2. Yeah.
Yeah. They could have simply made another Predator, like, that's in the middle of the jungle and it's very isolated. Yeah. But they did the genius move of saying, like, what happens if this dude's in the city, like, surrounded by thousands of people? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's something that's missing a little bit in horror. I heard from somebody, it might have been another podcast or something, that originally there was going to be a Halloween sequel that would have taken place like in a skyscraper, and basically like in the middle of the city, like Chicago or New York or something. And Laurie would have to fight through the skyscraper kind of thing, which brings
like
up
the raid.
It brings up whole new.
Strad did it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it brings up whole new angles of different tension and problems. Yeah. But yeah, I do think there is this overcommitment to, try to replicate what existed then when it can't possibly exist now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the weird part about the Halloween 2018 and the Halloween Kills, is even though it takes place in the present day, like, there's something like old timey about Haddonfield, like it's trapped in 70s or something, because I don't
trapped in its trauma from the events of that night.
Yeah, but I don't really
land the time forgot kind of elements,
exactly, because there's I don't like, social media doesn't play into it, like the cell phones don't play into it. It doesn't feel like a 2021. I know the movies take place in 2018, but relatively speaking, it doesn't feel modern in like, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like so many of the problems in those movies could be solved by just using your cell phone, but
yeah. And there is a chainsaw. I'll call the police.
Yeah. I mean, there's like how even in the backwoods of Texas, how likely is it that a family,
get one bar.
Yeah, like a family could live out in the middle of nowhere, slaughter people under the sly, cook them into barbecue, and then win barbecue competitions. Chili or whatever. Like, it just seems like even in the most isolated pockets of the world, like, you're going to have this stuff exposed. There's just no way you can get away with this stuff. Let's just take it, like you said, in the 70s, it makes sense that a bunch of kids are traveling through Texas, they get lost. People are gonna be like, well, shit happens. But now we just saw this recently in
Australia.
Was it Australia? What's the
girl was taken from the campsite.
I think so. There was, I don't know if this is the same thing, but there was the couple that was like Instagram living all their adventures on the road, and then suddenly the girl disappears and the guy disappears.
Leandro or Leandri.
Yeah. So it's kind of like it's kind of like even like her family would have picked up on the fact that like, yeah, like she's not answering her phone anymore after 2 days. That's weird. Like that whole
she's not posting. She's not. That whole lives their life online.
Yeah, that whole thing is unraveling. That whole thing unraveled. Yeah, in the 70s, that girl might be an unsolved case forever. Because we're like, where the hell did she go?
As many are.
Yeah, and now that just doesn't seem possible. So horror aspects are different now. Like, I mean, just real world is different now. So it's harder to mask that. So I am interested to see how this Texas Chainsaw or Bulgarian Massacre.
Tax break massacre, Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
I'm interested to know how they're going to do the horror of this, because I think it is running thin. It is, you know, getting a little old, you know, that template of trying to make it the same thing, you know?
So do you think, before we wrap up this week's talking point, do you think it'll be a success? You haven't seen Evil Dead, so our expectations are a little bit more heightened. The 2013 Evil Dead was a very worthy.
Don't Breathe. He did Don't Breathe as well.
Yeah, it Don't Breathe. Yeah, and like Fede Alvarez is a safe pair of hands, especially in terms of modernistic horror. And I think it could be interesting. I don't like the fact that it's a rebooted sequel, or whatever you want to call it, because Leatherface is now
rebooted sequel. Like,
he's like 70 years old now. Like, take the chainsaw off him, he's an old man, as I said, with bad genes. So like, I just think sometimes you keep harkening back to the original content too much, and you're going to start aging these characters out of existence, and you're going to take away some of the scare factor. But Will, are you looking forward to it before we go here? And I'll go to you then. Well,
I mean, who knows, because as everybody knows, Red Notice, the new Netflix film, was I think that if there was a box office, it would have made more than Avengers Endgame and Avatar, because apparently so many people are watching it.
Only because it's convenient, though, to watch.
No, I'm being sarcastic, because Netflix has come out saying like it's the highest thing they've ever done or whatever.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, could it be a success? Maybe, but I think Netflix kind of runs their own PR. And if they say that 55 million people watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean, we have no proof that they didn't. So it's all on what you believe, I guess. I don't trust any numbers when it comes to Netflix. So, because we have no basis for it. Like, you know what I mean? There's no, I don't know how you rank these things or how you determine who's watching it, because all that stuff's private and internal. So if they say it's a success and they want to spend $60 million doing it again, then that's their choice, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And Noel, what do you think?
I'll keep it real simple. Cautious optimism, like I said.
Yeah.
You know, I'm definitely going to go into it with as open a mind as I can. I'm going to try and avoid trailers or reading about. I just want this, because I've been guilty of letting other people colour my perspective, and like, you know, not watching films. And then Vinny, I can't remember what film recently. Dr. Sleep. He went, actually, that's a really good film. Just forget what you heard about. Go watch it. It's a really good film. So I watched it and I loved it. And then I was like, right, so just shut the fuck up. I give it a chance. Cautious optimism. I'll keep it simple.
Cautious optimism, and you just think it's going to be as successful as Netflix tells us it is, pretty much.
Exactly. If it isn't, you'll never. Because there's Netflix had this period where they were really proud of like all their independent films that they made themselves,
Yeah.
Some of them still stick around, but a lot of them you never hear of again. So if it fails,
air quotes,
it'll be buried in the algorithm. Never see it again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, me, I just think I don't want to see another reboot sequel, and it's unfortunate to say to go this way, because you might as well just reboot the franchise if you're going to reboot the timeline.
Just do it or don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. No offense sitting here, motherfuckers. But so anyway, that was this week's Talking Point. I'm your host, Vincent Green.
I'm your host, Noel John Toohey.
We got Karl Mac in the back, and that was Will Johnson, and we'll see you next time, motherfuckers. Peace.
Peace.